In this demonstration, I will be adding a Johnson Controls PCV VAV box controller to a BACnet MSTP trunk of an FX20. I will use the appliance included in FX Workbench 4.0 to do this. Our first step is to add the controller to the network. To do that, I will go ahead and choose the BACnet network under the drivers, right-click on it, and view the BACnet device manager. Now I will go ahead and discover all the devices on the trunk. Once the VAV cooling only controller is discovered, I'll go ahead and add that to my network. I can go ahead and rename it at this time, but I'll accept the default. Now, I'll go ahead and go to the BACnet import manager. And the BACnet import manager only lists controllers that have no proxy points added to them. Since I just added the VAV cooling only controller, there have been no proxy points assigned to it. So I'll highlight it, right-click on it, and select Edit. Now, here is the information used by the appliance. The name is VAV cooling only. I need to select the resource file that was used to download the file. And I'll select the VAV cooling only. Now once I select that, you can see that the system library fills up with the XML code to create the graphic, to add the proxy points, the trends, and the alarms. Now here is the standard graphic that will be used, both in the full-size graphic and the HX handheld graphic. If I already have a graphic, I can go ahead and point to it. In this case, I'll go ahead and create a new one. I'll also create a HX graphic for my handheld. Now down here, there's a selection for clean graphic. Now the standard graphic comes with all objects added to it. Now on some of the applications, you won't use every object. So the clean graphic takes the standard graphic, compares it to the objects listed, the points listed on the cooling only VAV CAF file, and creates a new graphic that only includes the objects in the CAF file. Now the last selection is the update action menu. If I update the action menus true, it will update the action menu so that you only have the option for override and auto. If we select it false, it will give us the emergency override, the emergency auto, the override and auto, and the set command. In this case, we'll go ahead and set the update action menu false. Now that the appliance has completed, the controller disappears from the import manager because there have been proxy points added to that controller. So let's go to the BACnet device manager and show you that indeed the VAV cooling only controller has been added. We can highlight it, right-click, and view the graphic. And you can see that indeed there has been a full-size graphic added to the supervisor for that controller. Now let's go down and look at the HX graphic. And here you can see that there's an HX graphic present, and now that can be used for handheld devices. So the next step is to go down to the cooling only, open up the points list, and take a look at the points that are available. These are the proxy points the appliance added. So let's look at the BACnet point manager. And you can see here that we've added quite a number of present values. Some of them may be read-only. Some of them are okay and writable points. Now these points are network variables from our controller. There are some other points added by the appliance that have relinquished default property IDs. These are internal points in our controller. So let's go to the PCT and show you the CAF file. Again, on the left, you can see the occupied schedule is a network variable. These are full access and mapped to our controller as present value and can be writable. Now, let's look at the zone set point determination. And we'll right click on this and we're going to view the details. Here you can see the cooling occupied set point, standby set point, the heating occupied set point. These points are all listed inside of a module. And over here you can see that BACnet has been exposed for those points. Now, you can also look under the zone temperature set point determination and again view connections. And here you can see that all these points are listed, however there's no connection to them from external points. Now these points, since they are revealed from the modules, are written directly to flash memory. And again, they need to be written to relinquished default. So you're actually writing to the relinquished default value inside the PCV controller. Now let's take a look at the relinquished default points. Now the relinquished default points will support all the commands that can be used for the network variables. So if I right click on it, you can do an emergency override, an emergency auto, an override, an auto, or a set. Now if you do an override, it still writes into the relinquished default value in the flash memory. So you could do an override and then release the override to auto. But commonly, a set command is used. So let's look at the set command and let's modify that to, let's say, 61. All right, so we have a set command of 61. We can view the property sheet now. And let's take a look at the fallback value. So here there is a fallback value of 61 degrees. So depending on the tuning policy, and let's take a look at what tuning policy that has been applied, the default policy, we might be able to continuously write to that point depending on what the max write time is. So I'll go to the BACnet network and go to the property sheet. And here's the BACnet network and here's the tuning policy. Here's the default. There's a minimum time between writes. There's a maximum time between writes. So if somebody changed this to continuously write to certain points, we could continuously write to the relinquished default values going into the flash memory. To prevent that, I recommend copying that tuning policy, then pasting it back, and let's give it a name of relinquish default policy. All right, so now I have one that has a 0 max write time, and I can apply that to all the PCV points that have relinquished default. To do that, I'll go down under the points list of that controller and go to these points, go to the proxy extensions and change it to the relinquish default policy. Now, these points will go by the new policy, and as long as that doesn't get changed, we won't continuously write to those points. Now, another item to be aware of is that these points can be used in control logic. If they're used in control logic, and especially if the control logic has a variable set, we could continuously write to those relinquish default points every time the variable changes. So my recommendation would be not to use control logic or any kind of schedule to write to these points continuously. Now let's take a look at the VAB cooling only, and we can go ahead and look at the property sheet of that controller. And under the property sheet, there's a JCI extensions. And I want to show you what would happen if you would have selected the update action menu true. So let's go back to the points. And we can go to the BACnet point manager, and let's go to the heating arc set point. So I can go action. You can see now my action menu is limited to override and auto. Now I could delete the controller and re-add it with the action update menu false. It would give me the set command and the emergency, or I could go ahead and view the slot sheet of this controller, come down to the set command, modify the config, and reveal that point. If I go back now, this point will support the fallback. This has been a demonstration of adding a PCV controller to a FX20 using the appliance in FX Workbench 4.0.